The beck is at my back. I hear it's running water, except the water in the beck does not run. It limps and it staggers, stinking over the scum that oozes at its bottom. But moving? I hear it move. That is bad. Nothing here must be allowed to move. I command the waters to stop, and they stop. And because I was watching, looking over there, right the way across the playground, and not just looking there, but thinking there too, I didn't see it coming until they were on top of me. Look, it's Billy No-Mates! I blinked and made my eyes focus on the pack. 5 of them this time. Roth, of course, Bates, Miller, and 2 others. It wasn't Roth who'd spoken, but Miller, and so he followed it with his hyena laugh. "Nice haircut," said Roth. It was the first thing he'd ever said to me directly. He'd probably never even noticed my existence before the stuff with the classroom, and the chewing gum, the shout, the chair. "Yeah," said Bates. "Nice haircut. Bit messy, though. Shall I put a bit more gel in it?" And then he began to hawk up a greenie, making a big deal of it, snorting back from his nose and up from his chest, getting a really big mouthful together. What happened next was a bit weird. I had my hand in my pocket, and I suppose I'd been playing with them, rubbing my fingers on the metal without thinking about it, without even knowing with the front part of my brain that they were there. But the next thing I knew, I had them. The scissors. The scissors I'd used to hack the chewing gum out of my hair, and I was holding them out, open, so that I was gripping the handle and one of the blades, and the other was pointed straight at Bates. I was mad. Mad because of the chewing gum. Mad because I saw he was going to spit on me. Spit a thick, foul greenie. They should have laughed at me. It was only scissors. Useless school scissors. They should have laughed, but they didn't. Bates' eyes went wide, and he choked on the phlegm that he was getting ready for me, and it sort of dribbled down his chin and onto the front of his school jumper, and then more of it went in a big line right to the floor without breaking. I didn't know what to do next. I was feeling stupid, really stupid, standing there holding the scissors while Bates choked on his slime. It was Roth who saved me in a way. Saved me from having to decide what to do next, I mean. He stepped forward, grabbed my wrist, and just took the scissors off me, as easily as if I were a baby. His hand was enormous, like a man's. I thought for sure he was going to hit me. Maybe there's something worse that can happen to you than being hit by Roth, but I don't know what it is. Once I saw him fight a year 11 kid, when he was in year 9. Even though the other kid was 2 years older than him, they were about the same size, Roth being such a monster. And the other kid was a cock of his year, not just some nobody. His name was, Compson. Yeah, Compson. Most kids thought Compson was alright. He wasn't really a bully at all, just hard. I don't know why he had to fight with Roth, probably to put him down, because he'd been mouthing off. But as soon as the circle formed in the social club park, with the 2 of them in the middle, you could see the fear in his eyes, and see that he knew Roth was too much for him. And I suppose there's kind of a bravery in that, going on with a fight, I mean, even though you know you're going to get your head kicked in. And he did. School fights come in different shapes. Sometimes the fighters think they're in a boxing match, and they dance around each other with the specters usually jeering at them, telling them to get stuck in. And they never do, because they're afraid of getting hurt, and they're really not there to fight, but to dance. Or the 2 will rush straight at each other and grapple together, each one trying to land a punch or a kick, and as long as they stay locked close, then again, usually no one gets hurt, because you can't get any power behind a punch when you're together like that, hugging each other. The worst kind of fights, or the best, if watching pain is your idea of fun, are the ones where the two kids hate each other and stand there punching, not caring if they get hit, so long as they land a few as well. There aren't many fights like that, and they don't last long because of the fury of it. This fight began like that. There was a good crowd around them, the way there always was for a fight, and I think most kids were hoping to see Roth get a spanking because everyone was scared of him, and he always did whatever he wanted. There was that usual time of intense silence before they started, with Roth staring straight at Compson, and Compson trying to stare back, except you could see he wasn't really focused on Roth, but somewhere behind him. And then there must have been some kind of signal, and they came straight together, and Compson hit Roth twice, quite hard, somewhere up around the forehead. But it was like hitting a truck with a newspaper. Roth didn't even flinch, hardly even put up his hands. And when those two punches had no effect whatever, the fight that there had been in Compson left him, and he ran away. Or rather, he tried to run away. But the wall of kids bounced him back with hard laughter. As soon as it was obvious that Compson was no match for Roth, they'd all change sides. Nobody likes to back a loser, especially an embarrassing one. He ran around the circle, skittering off the edge of it, looking back over his shoulder at Roth. Roth didn't chase Compson, but just waited a while. A couple of circuits, maybe, then just simply cut him off. It only took one great scything punch from Roth to lay Compson out flat. The sound was horrible, a sickening soft sound. I mean the sound of something soft hitting something hard. Almost a squelch, you'd have said. A squelch, or a splat. I was standing out of the circle, and so I couldn't see that well. But it was enough, and I heard the sound. And I thought that Roth might have killed Compson with that one big punch. Killed him dead. Roth then did something really bad. Something that had never been in our school before. It took us to a new place, like the invention of the machine gun took war to a new place. Compson was not on the floor, not even moving. I could just see him through the shifting cage of legs. The punch had got him right in the teeth. The front of his face looked like a collapsed wet bag. He was making a soft slurping noise, so I knew he wasn't dead. The crowd had gone completely silent, and Roth looked slowly around at the kids there, eyeing each one in turn. And no one could stand that black stare, and so they would look down, or shuffle back, as though even his look was dangerous. And when he stared at everyone out in that slow, methodical way, almost like it was a boring job he had to do, he looked down at the kid lying on the floor, and sort of shuffled around inside his trousers. Roth, I mean, not Compson, who still hadn't moved, and you really would have thought him dead except for that wet sound coming from his ruined mouth. And Roth took out his thing. You know, his thing. And he grunted with it in his hands, and his face became vacant and far away. And then a thick yellow stream of piss came out and splashed down onto the face of Compson. Well, that made him move. He spluttered and rolled, and then got up onto all fours and looked at Roth, a look with murder in it, as well as defeat. But Roth stared blandly back at him, the way you look at something reasonably interesting, but not really to do with you, and then give it a little half-smile. Compson couldn't hold the look any more than the watchers in the circle could, and he rolled into a ball and whimpered as if to say, "Please don't hit me again." Everyone was embarrassed then, and went away. I went away too, but I looked back, and I thought I'd see Compson lying on the ground by himself, because you're never so alone as when you lose a fight. And he was still there, but he wasn't alone. Bates and Miller were with him, kicking him and stamping on him and spitting on him, and I wanted to do something about it, but I was frightened, and I went home, and away. It wasn't my business. And that's what I was remembering when Roth took my pathetic weapon away from me, the way he takes sweets from a baby. And I thought some of those things might happen to me now. But none of those things happened. What happened was that Ross sort of put his big hand on my cheek. I don't know what you'll call it. It was softer than a slap, harder than a touch. He smiled at me. His teeth were weird. I mean, really weird. They didn't seem to come in different kinds, you know. The front ones different than the back ones. They were all the same, and each one was separate with a space in between. They were like the unevolved teeth of some ancient animal. Look at that, he said, his voice almost warm and almost affectionate. Will you look at that? I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to say. Smack him, said Bates. He was bobbing and shuffling like someone needed to go to the toilet. Ross turned on him. What? Bates was moving even quicker now, foot to foot, up and down, side to side. Hit him! His face, his guts, make him shit himself! Ross waited. A breath, 2 breaths. His face bland as putty. At last. I think he's all right. What? But you saw him? Saw what he did? Shut it. Yeah, but... And then Ross reached over and grabbed Bates by the scruff of the neck and pulled him closer, giving him a little shake as he did so, exactly the way that you would a cat. Bates made a high-pitched noise, a sort of squeal. Yeah? But what? Nothing, Ross. I was only saying... Well, don't. Yeah, sure. What do you reckon, Miller? I reckon he's all right. I think he'll do. What do you think, eh? Ross was looking at me closely, not smiling, his face grey putty again. I was so frightened of him. I still couldn't say anything. He wasn't like the other nutters. He was clever and shrewd. It shouldn't have meant that you'd be able to understand him better. The other kids had a kind of unpredictability. Like cats, you didn't know which way they'd turn. But deeper down, you could understand them. You could see what they wanted, like they were beasts. And their cravings were the cravings of beasts, and they cowered like beasts, cowered when they come up against something stronger than them. But Roth was completely incomprehensible. Unlike the beast, he did everything for a reason. But there are no rules for understanding him. Maybe there was a logic there. In fact, I'm sure there was. But it was an alien logic. It was like Spaniards coming up against the Aztecs. The Aztecs went to war to catch people so that they could cut out their hearts to appease their gods so they'd make it rain and help the crops grow. According to their rules, this was all rational, but to the Spaniards it was evil and mad. I'm not really getting this across. The thing about Roth is that, as well as being stronger and harder than everyone else, there was also the fact, the terrible fact, that he was cleverer too. Not clever meaning good at maths or English, but clever meaning that he knew what was happening inside you. And now he put his heavy arm around my shoulders and drew me away from the others. The weight on me was hard to bear. He was pressing down and squeezing me. Don't mind them. They're all right. Just a bit thick, he said. His voice now sounded oddly musical. You're not thick, though, are you? It was funny. The second time today someone had said that. Depends what you mean by thick. Ross smiled more broadly now, showing me those inhuman, wide-apart teeth. That's what I'm getting at. These jokers would never think like that. You see? I said thick. You wanted to know what I meant by it. That's 'cause you're thinking. Using this. And now I'm ashamed to say this part, but I don't want to leave out anything important. When he said that, his voice made soft, intimate, just for me, I felt a glow inside of me, a kind of happiness, warmth, peace. Ross was someone I hated, should have hated, more than any other person, hated because he was a bad kid, cruel and vindictive, and the kind of kid who would beat another to a pulp and then piss in his face. The kind of kid who would get his thicko mates to throw chewing gum in my hair to help pass the time in a boring geography lesson. But all he had to do was say those simple words to me, and I was happy. What I felt for him then, for those few seconds, was love. "We'll have a chat sometime," Rolf said, and then he wandered away. The others followed him, because they had no idea what else to do with their lives. That left me standing alone, no more able to think for myself than Bates or Miller. So I gazed into the distance, and across the playground I saw the group of weird kids. I noticed that they were looking over in my direction. I didn't intend it, but my eyes met those of Shane, and he nodded to me. It was a tiny gesture, one you'd hardly notice, but it was there. I don't know what he meant by it. Then I took in some of the others in the group, and just for a second I caught the eyes of Maddie Bray. And she might have smiled at me, but then another kid gave her a sort of shove from the side, which I think was meant to be friendly, but which seemed wrong for Shane's gang, as they didn't go in for much for that kind of physical kidding around. And then a bell was ringing, and it was time to go.